ESPN play-by-play guy Pete Souza, who hosts Inside the 12, is going to help us break down the 12 this week. Pete, this slate of games, similar to last week, I keep looking at it and I go, oh, shoot, we got like 3 or 4 games that I'm really excited about. That's what the Big 12 has curated in football this season. One team that stood out to me, though, and I know we talked a bit off the air about them as well, is BYU, because while there are always surprises, and we've seen negative ones, I mean, I don't think Texas Tech or TCU or West Virginia, Kansas have been up to brand yet. BYU has flipped that script. They're a top 25 team now going into Waco. I've been blown away with the Cougars.
Well, I have been too. And the one thing that's impressed me the most is their defense and defensive coordinator Jay Hill. And we mentioned earlier, Avery Johnson. They made one of the more exciting quarterbacks in the conference and the country look completely pedestrian last week. They're holding teams to under 13 points a game. You look out there, if you're a BYU fan, and you don't see Fred Warner, right? You don't see Kyle Van Noy. But you've got guys who seem to always be in the right place at the right time, and they're generating turnovers. They're making plays. They're making plays on special teams too, which might as well sort of be like generating points on defense. I mean, this is a team now, as you see him, Jake Retzlaff, I figured, okay, even like the Gary Bohannon, Jake Retzlaff back and forth preseason, I felt like it was always going to be Jake Retzlaff, but their ability to scheme defensively, right? That travels. That, you know what that does too? That shows up in the afternoon. It doesn't just show up at night. You talk about BYU coming into these day games. Oh, they're going to be. When you have a good defense, you're in good shape. And last week for me really moved the needle as far as, wow, like I think they held Kansas State without a passing touchdown or a touchdown for the first time in 4 years. And they've been doing that. They're one of 2 teams in the country that hasn't allowed a passing touchdown all year long. That's something that's not going to go anywhere. You better to be better with your defense than your offense. And I think we will continue to see BYU. And I think that's why Baylor could be in trouble this week. And that's why I'm surprised that BYU, I know it's all about history and trends when you talk about betting, and BYU is like 2-12 in their last 14 day games, but those day games were against really good opponents. This is a Baylor, this situation is manageable. Let's put it that way.
I don't know. I don't get 2-12 in day games. Doesn't make any sense in my brain. I'm not sure how you can. The trend is, and I don't usually look at trends because how do we correlation causation? But 2-12 in day games for BYU.
Dude, you want to hear something crazy? Last year, I called a lot of BYU basketball games, and I would do night games at the Marriott Center. And I swear BYU won by an average of 15, 20 points in all those games. And then I did a few road games. And then, of course, their NCAA tournament game was like an earlier road, and they lost those. I was like, what's going on, guys?
Vampire Cougs. It's the Vampire Cougs.
And I know Cougar fans don't want to hear that, but hear this, okay? I think the table is set for BYU to shake free of all that nonsense. One, you got to be up for the opportunity to win your first conference Big 12 road game ever. And you got to be up for the fact that you're 4-0 and you're ready to go 5-0. And now all of a sudden you're really solidifying a spot in the playoff picture. So I don't think there's no sleepwalking here.
Oklahoma State, Kansas State. This game is in Manhattan. 2 teams that lost last week. Chris Kleiman called it Kansas State's worst loss since he got there. That one in Provo. What do you make of a noon game on ESPN? That's one of the Big 12's biggest that we've been talking about since the preseason. Well,
I think there's more questions than answers, obviously, for Oklahoma State's offense right now. Mike Gundy benches Alan Bowman after halftime, said he needed a relief pitcher, and then he goes back to him. The comeback is too little, too late. I would say I would be excited about Ollie Gordon if I'm Oklahoma State because of this. Because last year in his last 11 games, he ran for 1,600 yards. And in his first 3, I think he ran for like 100 and something. So he started late last year. You hope that historic trend carries on into this year because Oklahoma State needs that to find their footing right now after that loss against Utah. You talked about Chris Kleiman. He mentioned last week that he saw Avery Johnson saw a lot of cover too playing against BYU. And changing the looks for that young quarterback seemed to have mystified him a little bit. So I think there's a bit of a blueprint there for Oklahoma State and their defense to step up. Remember, they generated 3 turnovers. It's not their fault their offense couldn't take 3 in the first half.
Yeah.
And their offense went to halftime with, I think, 3 points. That cannot happen. You know, if you're going to generate 6 turnovers in a game and you generate 6 points, let's say, if doing the math there, their offense needs to step it up. And this is a big opportunity for them this weekend.
TCU and Kansas, always tough to say that it's a must-win for either squad this early in the season. We've only played a third of the year, but that was honestly the case last week for Kansas against West Virginia. One of those teams would avoid going 1-3. Kansas on the losing end of that, now facing TCU at Arrowhead Stadium. It's home, but not really home. What do you make of this one?
Well, I make Devin Neal. I see him having another big day, and TCU has shown that their defense, can't keep anybody off the field.
Yeah,
and they're not doing that offense because I think Josh Hoover is a really good quarterback. He's been efficient. He's been exciting. He's been explosive. But that you give up 66 points to SMU. I mean, there's a scheme there where Kansas can find a way to score a lot of points with Devin Neal. And I think Jeff Grimes is going to do that this week. I think that he'll try to limit the mistakes for Jalen Daniels because we have seen him struggle, and this has been a disappointment, right? That's not a shocker to anybody. Last week, they should have won that football game. I mean, they should have beat UNLV. Given I was in the DFW area, and I was walking around. I'd done football earlier, and I had the game on my phone. I was like, well, they're going to win. And they didn't. And so I was like, wow. I was shocked to even see that they lost. So I that's a long way of saying I like Kansas.
Yeah, double-digit lead for Kansas last week on the road. And then
5 minutes left, dude.
Yeah, couldn't get it done. And that was flipped the script from where West Virginia was leading Pitt by 10 and ends up losing the game to Pittsburgh the week prior. So you got a team, you're like, oh, can they finish? Can they close? And then everything flipped on its head. This Colorado UCF game is even more intriguing for me now that Las Vegas has UCF favored by 14 points, 2 touchdowns in Orlando. Do you think the Buffs have a shot to not just win, not just cover, but also win?
I think they do have a shot to win the football game, but I think they'll have to stay in it early. They're going to have to kind of find a way to drag KJ Jefferson and RJ Harvey into halftime in a close football game. I think UCF will win the game. I think this is an opportunity for the Knights. An amazing setup here, okay? You've got big noon kickoff coming to Orlando when you're playing Colorado. Everybody's watching. Recruits around the country are going to be locked on your game and your campus in Orlando on Saturday. You beat Colorado, you do what you're supposed to do because you're favored by 14, and then you have the opportunity to play Florida in Gainesville on the road to really win over a vulnerable Florida team, to win over a lot of recruits in that state. It is a huge, 8 days or however you want to say it, 9-10 days coming up for this night's program. A really exciting time to be around that program.
Let's touch on these last couple quickly. Texas Tech hosts Cincinnati. All of a sudden, Scott Satterfield and Cincinnati are interesting. Tech favored by 3.
My man Sorsby's been surgical, dude.
Yeah.
He hasn't thrown one interception, and the running game has been exceptional for Cincinnati, and their defense has been making opponents black and blue. What can Texas Tech do? They're going to be wearing all black on Saturday. They found a way to win. I thought that was impressive that they found a way to win without scoring like 50, 60 points against Arizona State. Their defense has been playing better. Yeah. So that'll be an interesting. That's a toss-up to me.
The Cam Scadaboo Arizona State-led offense only putting up 22 was very impressive for Joey McGuire's squad.
It's held to 60 yards or something. Yeah, I was looking for more.
Oh, and then there's Arizona going to Rice-Eccles Stadium at Utah. This is personal for Kyle Whittingham after the way that Arizona beat down Utah last year. Will the Utes roll? Pretty much no matter who's at quarterback, because we have no idea.
We have no idea, and I think the Utes will roll. I think one guy to watch if you're an Arizona fan, a silver lining for you, is to check out Ted McMillan. Of course, we always talk about him. I was talking to my friend Jim Nagy, who's the executive director of the Senior Bowl, and he said that's a guy in the Big 12 that he is very excited about. I point blank asked him, who's somebody in the Big 12 that as a scout, as a front office guy who you love, and he said Ted McMillan. So there's the good news for the Wildcats. The bad news is Mekhi Bernard. 182 yards on 25 carries or 162 yards. Whatever it was a lot, and it was overwhelming for Oklahoma State. So it will probably be a lot for Arizona.
Utah's got some old school smash mouth to them. The defense has been so good. And Isaac Wilson stepping into the quarterback role and doing what he needs to do.
Doing just enough, right?
Yeah.
Doing just enough and knowing who you are. Baby bro's looking pretty good.
Pete Souza, thanks for doing this. It's so cool to have you on the show. Like Friday, building into college football tomorrow is huge. Pete, thanks for doing this. And where can folks find more of your work that you're on right now?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and find me on Instagram, Pete Souza, Petey Souza on Twitter. But Inside the 12, make sure you catch that. It's on the Big 12 YouTube page, and it's being distributed to markets around Big 12 country. It's an exciting deal that we're doing. I'm doing every week with Madison Hawk and the opportunity to bring more Big 12 football, right? To slice and dice it and present it to the fans of America has been a blast.
Coming up, the next time that I see you guys will be on Sunday morning following whatever happens tomorrow in Big 12 play. This has been It Always Will Be. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Locked on Dose Grande.